Thank you very much. I am so pleased and honored to be here today, and I too want to take the opportunity to thank the Ensemble Theater for allowing us to have this talk, as this place has a big history with me, and I've been on this stage, and been a part of this building, and I'm just, it's kind of, there's flow here. There's some flow. But I am Jenny Jones, K. Jenny, professionally, and Jones to my oldest and dearest friends, just alone. I am a certified fight director and master teacher in stage combat. What the hell is stage combat? Right? That's the first question. That's the first question. A lot of people didn't even know that there was something of that kind of deal. I tell people that's what I do. Sometimes there's some awkward jokes and replies, but somebody needs to keep the actor safe in the event of violence, stage fights, sword fighting. You go to Romeo and Juliet, you see the sword fighting. Somebody has to come in and teach those actors how to do that fight, choreograph the fight, and direct the actors through that fight emotionally and whatnot. So there's the branch also too that you would think that's in the stunt industry. So a lot of film and television, but there are people who stage and craft violence as a design. And then there are those actors who have to fulfill that duty, you know, the stuntmen who do all those high falls and set themselves on fire and crash cars. And then there are the actors and actresses who do the more intimate, violent scenes. And when we think of intimacy, almost anything in life is intimate. We can have intimate conversations over the phone. So intimacy is not just necessarily a physical thing, it's an emotional thing. It can be a spiritual or a religious thing, but it's this thing that's bigger than the proximity. So it's really about one's vulnerability or truth in the moment. And I started stage combat in the late 80s. Not too many women were part of the art form back then. And so I was really kind of on my own, and a lot in an industry where it was really, come on, it's like, you know, it was a boy's craft. And it wasn't so much that within the organization that I'm in, the Society of American Fight Directors, whether that was a boys' club, the whole industry of theater and film and television was just a very masculine-driven field. So as a woman, you know, you kind of do your best, and I was very successful choreographing all over the country. And I'm very blessed and honored that I have formed really great relationships, and a lot of the things that made me successful was when I was able and given the opportunity to bring my femaleness to the game. I was able to have this communication and talk with actresses in a way that my male colleagues were not able to in scenes of assault. And we had that play, that 70s play. It was really big, late 70s. It was called Extremities. And it was the woman who answered the door, and an uninvited man came in and held her hostage. One of Charlie's Angels did it, the movie. Never mind. It'll come to me in a very, there it is, thank you. It'll come to me in another 50s moment. I digress. But it was very violent, and there was tremendous sexual assault and bondage. And we needed to start thinking about the actresses who had to fulfill that journey in the play, not necessarily a movie, because the differences between plays and movies is to be able to emotionally have a vulnerable, truthful moment night after night after night after night, and stay mentally and emotionally healthy. The challenge in film and television is to be emotionally vulnerable and truthful with 35 people standing over you in the proximity 3 feet away. We don't think about all the sound operators and the grips and the directors and the assistant directors and all the cameramen and all the people standing over this intimate moment for the film. It's an amazing craft, acting. It's an amazing craft. And so when I was able to bring my femaleness to the room, there was a bridge that was being able to be built in communication. And that's what allowed me to become a master teacher in the art of stage combat. Huh, who'd have figured? Who'd have figured? And so now I teach more and choreograph less, but I really love teaching. And if at any time you have any kind of question, you raise your hand, I would love to answer it in the midst of this talk. It actually, yes, ma'am.
I just have to ask, how in the world did you get into this in the first place?
I was saving that, but I will offer, no. No, I will, so here it is. And that actually gets, I reserve the right to consider this, hold on. Because I know I'll have to digress, but it won't be. I think I can do it. Here we go.
Okay.
I was an actress in grad school in a play called Getting Out by Marcia Norman. And in this scene, there's a scene where she is a released felon, and her corrections officer was giving her a little help in the new world of freedom and looking for a little quid pro quo. And he assaults her and sexually assaults her and slaps her. And the director's like, oh, go ahead, slap her, she's an actress. And I'm in grad school and a student. And so I was kind of like, oh, okay. And he's like, if you cup your hand, you get a really good sound. It helps with the sound, right? As opposed to a flat hand. So make sure you cup the hand, right? Oh, hey. And so we practiced, cupping the hand, and then opening night, he took that cupped hand and went right over my ear. And now it's burst and has been burst for 35 years, and I have a significant hearing loss in that ear. And so it tells the weather, so I am gifted and with a whole new ability. Right? I have a whole new barometer. But that put me on, I had an emotional question as an actor. Why am I allowing another actor to do something to me on stage that I'm not going to allow an individual in my personal life to do? Why am I whoring myself for my art? When am I allowed to say no? What's my boundary? What's my boundary? But I didn't know I had boundaries. I didn't know I was allowed to have boundaries. And that kind of gets into the bigger question of a lot of what we have seen in the last 2 years and 2 weeks, is this question that people are allowed to have boundaries, and people are allowed to have agency over those boundaries. And it's changed the workplace. It's created this incredible revolution of thought. And I have been able to use my profession in stage combat and join the movement because I am able to be a part of an organization called the I am so nervous. I am just shaking. I love that you're here. I'm just so nervous. Okay. IDI, Intimacy Directors International. Because even though this revolution started 2 years and 2 weeks ago, 15 years ago, this woman, a graduate student who was a movement specialist, who also studied stage combat, was answering these questions pedagogically. And she constructed this methodology in a way of rehearsing and working with consent. It was a novel idea. Nobody listened to her because that's where we were. That's where we were. And it takes the giants falling for things to happen and a wonderful ripple effect. And with that, two things have happened. We've created in the industry a whole new field called the intimacy director or the intimacy coordinator for film and television, or the intimacy coordinator and choreographer and the intimacy director for theater. And they all serve different roles. Film and television, they protect and make sure that there is consent to what is being filmed, how much is going to be revealed, how far the sexual act goes. And is everybody on board with what's happening? And did the actor even consent to it being done that day? To the intimacy director, who helps actors through the journey of the repeatable act, of how to do it night after night after night after night, while protecting themselves and making sure that they're healthy and have strong senses of who they are. So, and here's my digress. So, I reserve the right to take a moment. Okay. May I have a cup of coffee?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Jordan. So, with IDI and the whole idea of consent, the other thing that has happened besides this professional explosion of the jobs and need for consent in the film industry and theater, but what it's done is it's brought consent into the rehearsal process and how to cast. And when consent is brought to the rehearsal and an atmosphere is created where two people or a whole room can completely be truthful and vulnerable, knowing they will be taken care of, the emotional commitment just blossoms. And what consent has done is it's improved the acting. It's improved everybody's work. The pillars of how to work through consent, the need for communication, and just general agreement, people allowing to have boundaries, learning how to say no in a world of yes and, because actors are trained not only to say yes, but yes and. We never say no. Actors never have boundaries. And that leads us to really what the beauty and the vulnerable moment is that we have two people, me and you. May I borrow you for a moment, just to focus on? Okay, hi. Right? We meet. It's our job. We show up our first rehearsal. We meet each other. We don't know each other. And then we step into a world and put on the mask of these other people, our characters. And these other people have a very intimate relationship. They love each other, they trust each other, they've changed each other's worlds, they have courage in each other, and it's very deep and bonding relationship. But that is not you and me. That is us and them. And so as actors, we have to really tend to our pronouns. When am I? I. And when am I? She, her, I, which I. And so there's a lot of emotional care that has to be taken when actors participate in this kind of activity, that they understand what I, who I, is taking part of that act. In particular, an act that must be repeatable night after night after night after night, knowing that whatever we do, it's not personal. It's not personal. This is not a personal relationship. We are doing something physical and sharing and trusting, and then we're stepping out, closing, tom off, step across, done. And there's consent in the room, and beautiful things happen. The other thing that consent has brought into the room, because with consent naturally leads to issues of diversity and inclusion. Because when there is, say, for example, harassment, it happens to everybody in the room. It happens to everybody in the room, not just between the two people. In the theater, the director is a very powerful person. And actors succumb and yield to what the directors say they want. And there are classic stories of really horrid directors and the things that have happened to actresses or actors as a result. And the level of what we call inherent coercion just in the relationship. Just in the relationship. And the fear of the repercussions of what we do to say no. And it's so beautiful what happens when people learn to say no. And to understand that that's no big deal. We just pivot. We just move on, make another choice. Or we say, in our yes and world, we say no but. How about this? Giving us more ownership. In stage combat, we use this as if you would like to, if the director, here it is, the third person gives us permission to hug. I want you two to hug. Well, we haven't consented yet, so we have to make that arrangement. It's like, you're like, right? But you don't know where. You don't know where. And so I would go, this is right there. Or I put your hands right there. And then you know, and there's no question, because we all know that that first time, I don't care how well the actors may even know each other. There's always going to be that moment of, I just don't know. So why not just arrange it real quick, agree on it, do it. People think having consent in the rehearsal room takes a long time and interrupts the process, when actually what happens is that it speeds the process along, because everybody's open and honest with what's going on. And that's just flow. That's just flow, because there's no. Or where did I mean that? That was a 50s moment.
It's already been negotiated.
Yes, in that respect, yeah. And everybody respects each other's boundaries. So that's my little talk about flow in my crazy world, and what consent has brought to the world of theater and film and television. And that actually, who'd have figured that by creating boundaries, we have created flow. So that's my little talk. I have, at time, I was told to leave a little extra time because I knew there might be some questions. So questions, I will take them. Go. Any questions? Oh, does anybody have any questions? Yes.
So when you're setting up a new cast, are you often in part of, that here we're going to take care of each other and we have some ground rules. Do people rely on you to set the ground rules, or is that starting to
Well,
get more across the industry?
it's starting across the industry. One of the things that one of the founders of IDI is doing, her name is Alicia Rodas, and she has some local ties in that she was an intern at the Cincinnati Shakespeare Festival and graduated from Wright State. So she was a lovely local girl. And she's the one who's actually, through the work on HBO's The Deuce. Does anybody know what The Deuce is? But it is about the sex industry. She started on that show, and through that show has transformed the film and television industry, and is now writing best policies and procedures through the Actors Union of SAG-AFTRA. She's helping that union write those about how it happens, starting with audition. Does the actor agree? If we know that there's going to be nude, say nudity, for example, or sex acts, does the actor consent to that before they even audition for the job? That, for example, all the way through to the dressing room and the set. So that's being happened right now. And the same for Actors Equity in theater. So we're a new thing. A lot of colleges and universities are adopting best policies and practices that was shaped by Chicago Theater Alliance, called Not in Our House. And a lot of theater companies are changing their human resources. So we're trying to get the word out. And a lot of the challenges is that we are always playing kind of catch up to the need. We've yet to really get ahead of what's going on and be able to be more in control. We're just filling the need as it arises. Did I answer your question at all? You asked when we're brought in.
Yeah, in the process of setting up a cast, when do you generally get consulted? I guess that's a
Oh, no. The casting has nothing to do with the intimacy director. They have no say. They work with who is cast. Yeah, everybody, yeah.
How common would you say that you are throughout different theaters? Or, sorry, how common are you throughout different theaters, and how much work do you have to do to spread the word about?
Well, we're not common yet, but we don't have to work very much at spreading the word. Actors, actresses are speaking up. There are wonderful articles, the Times, everybody. So it's getting out there, but it's kind of like a little wildfire. So what we want to do now is make sure that, because we're dealing with very intimate issues, that the theaters and the directors or producers who do hire people who say that they are intimacy directors really have the adequate training and are prepared for it. And anybody can be an expert in anything. So, but each one's been carefully vetted. That's something. Yes.
Has Cincinnati been receptive to adopting these protocols?
I know what's happened. What's wonderful is that Alicia's returned to Cincinnati Shakespeare and has worked on a couple of shows here in town. I cannot speak of that. I don't have personal knowledge of that. Yeah.
One of the counterintuitive things about creativity in general is that when you have to work within, I don't want to say limitations, but boundaries, it tends to spark more creativity. And you alluded to this earlier in your talk, and I'm curious if you could tell us a more specific example of how you've seen this type of, setting intimacy boundaries, how has that enhanced acting in your experience?
Hang on one second. I'm going to have a real challenge answering your question for a moment, and that's only because I see how it affects everything for me to think of that one moment. Sometimes just...
Or just, in general, what do you see happening under those circumstances as far as creativity goes?
As far as creativity goes?
Of the actors, yeah.
Of the actors?
How do they rise to that?
How do they rise to that? When a lot of actors sometimes, for whatever reason, will wait to be told what to do. You just tell me what to do and I'll fulfill that. And so they're not necessarily puppets, but sometimes they may feel about the director or they shy away from the material, that they just aren't able to, what we might call, bring themselves. Just bring it to the work. Make some choices, throw it out there. It's okay if it's wrong, just put yourself into the work. And then there are other actors who will just, once you tell them what to do, they're fine. And that gives them some flow. Or there's some actors that just really need to be told everything what to do. The difference between the one that needs to be told a lot what to do, they don't bring a lot of their own creativity as a result. They don't have a voice. They're not bringing their opinion, which is what creativity is, I think, in a little bit, is one's opinion in the work, sometimes physically. The ones who bring themselves more physically, then therefore bring themselves more emotionally to the work. These people are a little bit braver for whatever reason. When you add consent, everybody's braver. Everybody's braver. And so the work between the two, the tension between actors, gets deeper, richer. Everybody is able to step out. Everybody feels more, and I think somebody said, taken care of. And one of the things that's happening recently that's attached to this whole, consent advocacy movement is the awareness and respect for the dialogue of mental health. And that there's still such a stigma about mental health. And that I can break my wrist and I go, "Sister, this hurts," and we go to the doctor, and she brings me lunch and drives me because she knows I can't drive and do my clutch at the same time. And people take care of each other when you're hurt. But if you tell somebody that you're hurt, we don't talk about it. And adding to the craft, the craft of acting, which is a deeply personal, emotional experience. That's our paint. That's our color. My feelings, truthfully and honestly, connected through the universe of humanity and empathy and compassion for this character named Sarah, is richer if I can create in a world free of fear. And Sarah is better for it, and henceforth the audience is better for it, therefore the art and the craft is better for it if I am free to bring myself to the work. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. The emotional stuff. There's all this stuff that's happening in the industry, but it's the acting I really want to kind of make an emphasis on today. Those are our colors. That's what we have. Our joys, our passions, our fears, our traumas, night after night after night after night, through the eyes of another person. and then step out and have the mental health. The stage combat was all about physical health. Are you safe? I don't want to hit you over the head with this sword. Are we safe? I want the fight to be safe. And then, are you emotionally safe? That's part of the actor's job. I'm sure they'll take care of it. And then I choreograph Macbeth. And the Macbeth has to manhandle the Lady Macbeth and throws her to the floor. And suddenly, the actress, it was just a technical thing, but the actress, when she hits the floor, stops and starts shaking. And she didn't tell anybody, but she had been sexually assaulted, and he had thrown her to the floor. And this was not even in the course in her brain, but the physical act was enough to set off a PTSD event. And I am fight director. And are we therapists? No, but we are advocates and supporters. And I just got my mental health first aid certificate. And so I agree. And get your mental health first aid and you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm able to help this woman through the event to know that she will recover. It's not permanent. And we step out. And as a fight director, I now know we're not going to go to the floor. And even then, does she feel emotionally safe to do this night after night after night? She had to ask herself and give permission to ask in the rehearsal, am I safe or am I injured? Am I in danger? Am I unsafe or am I injured? And come out and reserve the right to come out of that with a knowledgeable, self-knowing answer. Can I walk it off, or do I need to sit down? Those different types of injuries. It's a real question for actors. We have them. And sometimes, never mind. I can go into a whole nother thing of how it's affecting actors all over. Yes?
I'm an executive coach, which kind of gives some color to what I'm about to talk about. That in the business world, we are often expected to not bring our personal, be a different person.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in the business world, there is an assumption that we'll put up with stuff that we would never put up with in our personal lives.
Straight up.
It's really resonating.
Straight up.
Of some version of, this is just work. And I'm sorry, but just has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And I'm really struck by that. And the other component is, as you said, when something happens at work and it just resonates and nobody around you knows what to do because you're reacting in a way that appears to be out of sync with what just happened.
Yes.
And then you may get a reputation for that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a one-time thing. You have nowhere to really talk about it. And I'm sorry, nobody talks to HR
Well,
because they don't feel safe.
correct.
But I'm curious to see as this moves forward, how this will impact the workplace.
Oh, I think it is.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
How that can, work through that in that conversation. And the recognition that we are allowed to bring ourselves to work. We're allowed to get hurt, actually, and show it at work.
Yes.
And that there's no real artificial division of self there.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about acting is like, and theater and art is, it is allowed to and is going to be uncomfortable. This is not about your comfort. This is about, are you safe? And there's a big difference. And many actors, I know myself included, going, well, I know it's uncomfortable, and I kind of like, that's what I love the art for a little bit. I like to chew on that because I love to relish that an actor's strength is human weakness. And there's an art and a craft and a beauty in our weakness, and so that's what I like to bring to it. But I hope it does, because following all of this brings diversity and inclusion. There brings equality. Bringing consent and permission for advocacy brings equality to the room because everybody has a voice. We have to deal with but along with that, and I think this is what affects business, is the relationship of inherent coerciveness. A boss has status, there is status, and how a lot of I think it'll affect business in how the tree and ladder and how authority is structured. I think it's probably going to affect a lot of it. And HR. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You mentioned a lot about HR, and I was just wondering how attorneys are involved in the process. Are they're involved to protect the actor, or are they there to protect the school, company, studio?
Well, I think that's the only response I can give based on my knowledge of it is that is relative to the changes that are happening because of the demands in the industry. Some businesses have to wait for some sort of action in order to change their language. Some are more proactive and use that actually as a means to recruit. So I really don't know much about that beyond that. I hope that's a fair enough question or a response. Yes.
I don't, maybe this is a whole other topic, but I imagine how complicated and difficult this can be with adults, and I'm wondering how this works with kids or even teenagers.
Well,
the whole range.
when we train actors how to work in a world of consent, there's a whole kind of structure on how to say no and how to work with boundaries and physical responses and verbal responses and nonverbal responses and once you give them the tools, they just run with it. And even they just to learn to say, may I take you by the hand? May I touch you? And I just knows it flourished. The challenge, here's the challenge on how we're seeing it, and I'm putting it out there on the interwebs, is high school drama and theater and how it's affecting our under age 18 actors and its ability to be in harmony with some legal, how to, what we're allowed to ask people under the 18 to simulate sex acts. And so every high school crucible, which has John and Abigail and a lustful, long, glistening kiss, is actually asking those children to do something that's kind of illegal. And intimacy directors are teaching theater directors how to create, or high school theater directors, how to help create a vocabulary that an embrace, a hug, can be just as meaningful as any kiss. Sometimes you just don't need the kiss. It's okay. Just let two spirits, two people come together. Let's help tell that story, right? It's all good. Where was I going with that? I went down a rabbit hole. I have a few more minutes. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about human connection. So you were talking about if you were each playing characters, and as people, you don't know each other, but your characters have this very intimate relationship. When you play that over and over with someone else night after night,
Well, that's the ever-changing, as individuals, there's no ever one-way thing for that at all. In theater, we call it the showmance, where you allow yourself to have a nice, lusty, playful relationship on stage, knowing you're just friends, and then it's nothing. And then you understand maybe sometimes why. You see it a lot in the movies because they do film a lot together, intimate scenes. Actors and actresses marry who star together in a film. And that lasts a couple, months. You got right? Because they confuse their pronouns. They think what's happening on camera. They think what's happening on stage. They begin to feel it's real because it is real. Because it is real. But it's not real. And it's balance and state of mental health and being able to step out and sometimes just the health of your own personal needs. So fun things happen on stage, with or without the audience always knowing what's happening on stage, right? Between actors. Many things consented to, some things not consented to, right there on stage. Right there on stage, that's happened to me twice. Because he knew he could get away with it, because what was I allowed to do? So, what you gonna do? So it's all different. And we had a fabulous on-stage relationship. Off-stage, we didn't talk to each other. Right? We had no problem with our pronouns. Yeah? So it's different. It's different. Any last and closing questions? Yes.
Is there any protection to people's consent? Like if someone gave their consent, is the director allowed to, okay, this person isn't willing to do, isn't necessarily what I want, or but what the director wants to do, could they just easily find a new person, or is there agency and protection to that person's consent?
Okay. Well, that's a fascinating question. And the answer is, depends on the situation, right? In college, say, I teach at CCM, at conservatory, say in the midst of a rehearsal process, a teacher really, or a professor or a director, even hired in director, wanted a student to do something, that student said no. Sometimes it's easy to replace that student. Sometimes it'd be really hard to replace that student. There's a big coercive relationship there between teacher-student, right? So that's why sometimes students say yes because they actually are never allowed to say yes. They're never allowed to give consent, by the way. They're just never allowed to. Then professionally, that threat, that coercive relationship exists exponentially. Film, you said no to me? Okay, you'll do it? All right, go on. That fast. So it just depends on your situation. But every gig, the amount of money, every actor is always faced with, is this worth it? And then sometimes it's like, yeah, it's worth it. Or it's like, no, it's not worth it. But only that actor knows their boundaries, and only that actor can be their agent. It doesn't matter what world we're in. Relationships are relationships, people are people, consent is consent. If you or I were in a personal relationship, who's there to protect my consent but you? With no one but each other. In that respect, and that's the beauty of it, and that's flow. Yeah? It's this, the two people, you and me. Okay. So I want to thank everybody for having me. Thank you all very much. Thank you.